I just want to start by offering my thanks for just such an unprecedented response to what we've put out here. We have almost 200 funders who have signed up for either this webinar or the one right after it. We know that this is a super important moment for philanthropy to come together, and we really see this happening, and I'm really excited about it. I want to start by just offering a few words from GFE, and then I want to turn it over to our partners at the NEA Foundation, led by Sarah Sneed. So number one, for those of you who are a part of GFE, you know that our role is to really serve as a connector and an information source. And at this moment, when we know that we are experiencing massive school closures that are only expected to continue and grow, that this is a moment where we need to be thinking about the equity dimension of how we serve students, especially as they lose contact with their schools. This is everything from the kind of academic internet access features of distance learning to the fact that students are facing hunger if they are not able to have their breakfast and lunch at schools. And so we want to start to begin to address this. We at GFE want to start to begin to think about how do we connect the philanthropic community that cares about education with those who, number one, have knowledge of what's happening on the ground and where the need is and what it is. And then number two, have the ability to deploy resources broadly and quickly. And so that led us into conversations with both the NEA Foundation and the AFT Foundation. These are the affiliates of the two largest national teachers unions. They both have multi-millions of members. They are separate entities from the unions themselves, but they have connections that will allow them to get the type of information they need to deploy resources quickly, well, and to the right places. A few expectations for this call. Number one, this is a formative conversation. As all of us know, things are in motion. Very little is certain right now, and so we're inviting you to a conversation where we're asking for your feedback, your input, and your kind of continued effort to work together and build the next steps here. Sarah will speak for a while and give some initial ideas. We know that many of you will want to hear what you're doing, and we'll try to create space for that. So the agenda is just this. I'm going to continue to speak for just a minute or two more. We're going to turn things over to Sarah and her colleagues at the NEA Foundation. They'll speak for 15 to 20 minutes max. And then we have another half hour for just a collaborative conversation about how do we move from some ideas to making sure that we deploy resources as quickly as possible to the places that need them. And we'll reserve the last 5 minutes, and those 5 minutes are not going to be at the exact top of the hour. We want to end at about the 25 of the next hour, so that would be 12:25 on the East Coast, and give a little stretch break. Invite those of you who want to come back to our next call that starts at the bottom of the next hour. A few notes on technology. Number one, because there is such interest in these calls, we're a little bit worried about bandwidth and interference with the smoothness of the call. So we may ask you, with the exception of the NEA Foundation, we may ask you if there are any wrinkles in how this call is going to turn off your video. That's just going to help make the call run smoothly. I have no idea why. That's not my area of expertise. Second, you should know that we're recording this call, and so we'll be able to kind of take some notes and share out some notes. We know there are many that want to participate that are not able. And then finally, I encourage you to use the chat box. I will be a monitor of the chat box, and I will interject periodically. You all can interject. You have access to being able to unmute yourself. But as a practice, let's all be on mute unless you have a question to interject. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Sarah Sneed of the NEA Foundation.
Sorry for that delay, everyone. Good morning. What incredible circumstances, right? Well, first of all, my appreciation to all of you for joining this call on such quick notice. But of course, we all are in real time. I know that many of us are planning to shut down shortly and begin teleworking, and things are a little confused and chaotic in these uncharted waters. So all the more our appreciation that you have taken this time, because we are hearing of tremendous need nationally among students, schools, school districts, as they, like we, are trying to figure out how to navigate this extraordinary circumstance of the coronavirus. So I do want to just underscore also, for those of you who may not be familiar with the NEA Foundation again, that we are an independent entity that has been created by educators to bring greater equity, excellence, and opportunity to public schools and public education. Toward that end, the NEA Foundation has a robust grants program. We process hundreds of grants each year. This is a normative practice for us, in addition to which we foster the development of learning communities, peer-to-peer exchanges among educators. We have a fellowship program. And so, for instance, now we are working in the South with many that are interested in building community schools. We promote global learning. But quite frankly, this call is not about us. I just wanted to give a very, very brief introduction if you're not familiar with the NEA Foundation. So we are learning in real time here what is and is not happening. There's not a lot of definitive information, unfortunately, with respect to support for schools, just as we are struggling for definitive information generally around the coronavirus. But you should know that the Department of Agriculture has made available waivers so that schools can continue to try to get foods to students. You should know, however, and this is one way that all of us can be a help right now. The only states that have applied for those waivers thus far are Alaska, California, Kansas, Maine, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Utah, Virginia, Washington, and Wyoming. Only 13 states have applied for these waivers. And one thing we all can do, again, is to encourage our state to apply for those so that schools can continue to serve meals in non-congregate settings. It essentially allows them to function in the way they would normally for the summer feeding programs. In addition to that, some are working to ensure that Congress acts on the Families First Corona Response Act, which is Bill 6201. And this would allow for an increased allocation to child nutrition programs. It would allow school officials to distribute foods in a number of settings. It would allow for flexibility in meal components if food supply is interrupted. And it creates a pandemic program to provide resources to families. We don't actually know what that really means right now, and we're trying to find that out. And of course, one of the things that we will do following this call is we'll work with Celine and her team to ensure that as we learn more about what is being made available, that you have access to that. Of course, there are multiple places now publishing lots of information. But most,
and we do have a website, so we'll continue to put everything that we find there on our page.
Perfect. But really, toward the focus of this call, we have been meeting with the NEA, which, as Celine has said, of course, has very broad national reach, reaching 3 million educators, and they are surveying their membership and schools and school districts, as are others that we're in touch with, whereby they're identifying what some of the highest needs are and the ways in which we all can help. We are finding that can be bundled into a few categories. So, of course, as I've just referenced, the provision of meals for students who rely on free and reduced meals from school is an absolutely critical need. Across the country, districts are looking at creating grab-and-go programs looking at means whereby they might keep the school facilities open. By that, I mean the kitchen facilities singularly and specifically. And this, by the way, also enables those who clean the schools, who prepare the food, and who drive buses to continue to receive a means of income, while also creating a wonderful system of supply of food for kids and families. You may have heard that in North Shore, this is already happening. Seattle really has been a bit of an exemplar in setting up a means whereby the school's kitchen facilities, we have heard, are remaining open, and they're using their school buses to distribute those meals to kids. Here at the NEA Foundation, we also are reaching out to the Food Industry Association, the National Grocers Association, and the Produce Managers Association. And we are asking, if you're not familiar, the Food Industry Association is a trade association for most of the major grocers in this country: Stop and Shop, Giant, Kroger, Piggly Wiggly, Safeway, and such. And so we are asking what grocers are intending to do, prepared to do, and how they might also potentially be a source of support, where if funds can be made available through schools and school districts to families, coupons, let's say, they could take those to their local grocer and thereby be able to get access both to packaged and canned foods and hot meals potentially. That is all very much in early stages of discussion. I can't promise you that it will in fact happen. All of this evolved in the past 24 hours. In addition to addressing the need for meals, food, we're concerned about digital divide issues. As you know, a lot of students are going to be expected to school remotely, and many of our students don't have access to the technology that is needed for that to be real. And so many are looking into solutions to address that need. There's a need for the actual technology. Hotspots are being set up also in community so that kids can go to those. Of course, that presents the obvious problems of bringing people into a public space when that is not being encouraged at this time. But internet access for students who don't currently have reliable access to the internet is a really critical issue. Similarly, there are a lot of teachers around the country who, for whom this is a completely novel way of working. And there's a lot of support needed for immediate training, webinars, and supports for teachers so that they can learn the best practices in supporting remote learning and so forth, essentially overnight. At the same time, again, I would close where this is at the moment with how I opened. The NEA, as of yesterday afternoon, was starting a robust outreach nationally, again, as we are as well through other channels. And we are continuing to learn, and I expect that over the next several days, we'll get more and more information about how your support and resources could be put to the best use. And of course, at the NEA Foundation, our greatest concern would be that we are helping the highest need school districts. And so equity will be very much in our mind as we think about the distribution of resources. Celine, I don't know if you want me to go so far at this time as to talk about how a pooled fund might be set up.
I think that my question to you was going to be, so we have 91 funders on the phone.
Wow.
So number one, again, I will say thank you all for your dedication to this. And, we put this out within less than 24 hours ago. And so the response is really heartening and I think super important. But so answer the question, if there are folks on the phone who have resources to give, how can you be, how would you envision being an intermediary that would help those resources get to the places that need them?
So the foundation has in times past, during other emergencies, established these funds, these pooled funds, means whereby folks can contribute. It's really it can be kept rather simple. Um, um, Gifts can be sent electronically to the foundation, and actually, I don't know how technical you want me to get with this, Celine. I mean, we would
Yeah.
essentially create the pooled fund, and then, of course, in dialogue with the state affiliates and so forth, put together. We do not at this moment have a grant process system for this, but that, like this call, will be generated right away. But again, it's not something that we're unaccustomed to. We've done this, unfortunately, during hurricanes and such. So we have the capacity to receive the funds and ensure they're just and equitable and appropriate distribution.
I think that's really helpful. So I would love to now open things up. I know that we have funders from all different areas of the country on the phone. I would love to open the floor, number one, to questions, and number two, to comments. And I want to, the only parameter that I'll offer is that this is a conversation for funders about how to make sure that resources are moving toward where they need to.
I might add, just while we're waiting on a response, both the NEA Foundation and the AFT Foundation are completely aligned on how we will address this need. And we appreciate that there will be callers during this hour and the next hour, and our responses as far as will be exactly the same. We just wanted to provide folks an opportunity to be able to contribute funds as seems best for you. And so you will have these two options. But yes, I just wanted to ensure that there wasn't confusion with respect to whether there was a real clear distinction. As I understand it, there is not.
That's helpful. So we do have a question about supporting students in higher education that are impacted by university closures like food insecurity, healthcare. Before I turn it over to you, Sarah, I will note that if you go to our website, you'll see that the first link is to the EdEquity and RISE Student Relief Fund done through Believe in Students. That is it's a crowdsourcing mechanism for donating to student aid funds at the higher education level. Sarah, I imagine you have more.
Not at this time. I want to be perfectly candid about what is and is not set up immediately. Again, this is all being developed, and I don't want to overpromise. We have robust opportunity to get funds out quickly right now throughout K12, and are working on looking at higher ed, but at present, I don't have that designed.
I think that's helpful. Can you speak at all from your past experiences or the foundation's past experiences in terms of timeline? I know that this is a situation where we all wish the resources to get to students in the form of food, in the form of internet access today. Obviously, that's not possible. Can you talk a little bit about a streamlined, process? Talk a little bit about, timelines that you might foresee.
What I can assure everyone of is that our commitment is to turn these funds around as quickly as possible. This is a most urgent, obviously urgent situation. There will be no protracted grant application process. We will have to rely very heavily on the endorsement and support verifications of school districts, principals, and state affiliates of the NEA to ensure that those requests that come to us are appropriate and so forth. But there would not be, we will be working, we are actually likely teleworking effective early next week, but we don't foresee that that will in any way delay our response time. We've been working over this whole week to ensure that we're able to continue to function as close as I don't want to overpromise. We don't foresee any delays, but like probably many of you, the teleworking will be new for us, but we will adjust quickly. Do I see Zoe Calderon?
Yeah, hi Sarah.
I don't see your face, I see your name.
It's good to see you, and thank you for your leadership in these unprecedented times. I'm Zoe Stem Calderon. Just for folks on the call, I'm at the Rakes Foundation. We are based in Seattle. We are watching right now as our schools are closed weeks, and I think the thing I've noticed most from our leaders is what a difficult set of decisions. Sorry, they're having to make, and I do think that getting behind superintendents and ensuring that they have resources, that their teams have resources,
Yes.
and that they can call on the nonprofit sector as they need them, but to reverse I think there's a troubling trend happening right now in our community where nonprofits are overwhelming our leaders, reaching out, and sure in ways that should be that they want to be helpful, but it isn't helpful. And so the thing I think is just so important for us in the funding community to think about is we have a job to do here, which is to sustain the nonprofit sector. That's part of our job. But the other job we have to do is to get the resources to the people who are making the most difficult decisions in our communities. So, sorry, but I want to say that like the way that you guys can help us do that is really important. But I also wanted to clarify, are you talking about funding directly to superintendents and to districts, or how are you considering where funds will flow? Because I think right now that is, to me, the most urgent need. We have got to put these central offices in the driver's seat.
Exactly.
We're going to mess this up if we flow funds in other directions.
That's exactly right. Superintendents, principals, and educator associations that are setting up viable means of providing supports.
Right.
I absolutely agree and want to underscore the importance of what Zoe has said. We've seen this in other crises, other national emergencies, where the desire to help goes awry. And by the way, I can't see your face at all, Zoe. I see your name on my screen, and I don't actually have other people's faces up, but I understand your emotion as well. This has been just overwhelming for everyone. I mean, we are the least of it, those of us in philanthropy trying to scramble to continue our operations. And many have been in tears. I was on the line last night speaking with colleagues from Harvard because of another program plan, and it describing just not only chaos, but students just utterly devastated.
Yeah.
And without plans, without financial resources. So, I do want to say, though I didn't have any immediate response for you, Celine, relative to higher ed, it's because I have a fatal practice of not overpromising anything. But we're all gravely concerned, and this is an emotional situation.
Well, I have a quick question. This is Jackie Elias at JP Morgan.
Yep.
So for Zoe, actually, and for those who are in more kind of advanced parts of implementation of this, are there things that you would recommend for communities based on your experience, both as a resident and as a funder? Like, things you wish you had known? I mean, because you're 4 weeks in or 6 weeks in, which seems like a lifetime right now, given the changes. So are there things that you would recommend that you've learned so far that would be helpful as people, civic leaders, and funders are thinking about it? I think your comment about not overwhelming the people who are trying to make the big decisions is a really good one. So it would just be helpful to just kind of know more about what you've learned.
Thank you for that question. I do feel like speaking to people across the country from Seattle has felt a little bit like we're like, hey guys, it's coming. So I think that that point is one that I think we're seeing heavily. I think really look out for your community foundations in Seattle, the Seattle Foundation and United Way. have collaborated together to build a just-in-time needs fund that's already raised $10 million and is growing, but that will not be enough. And I think these efforts that are focused on the issues of schools are really important. I do think these key issues that Sarah raised are the issues that we've seen our communities really having to grapple with, which is food security. How do we maintain some learning and some structure for young people, particularly who are at greatest risk? My husband is a vice principal in a school right now, and he's, having difficult conversations with families who have no social safety net, are concerned about the welfare and safety of their children because they were already high kids who needed a lot of support, and they don't know what to do. So, hold your leaders tight, I would say, like have their back, like watch out for how the media portrays them and the difficult choices that they're making. I think we can all do things to get behind them. And then I would just say, like, we're already having to think about, and you may not have already, but I hope you do, and send us ideas if you have them. Like, we're starting to have conversations with our nonprofit partners about what's like the minimum viable that you need to manage through this crisis. How could we free you up from milestones that may not make sense anymore? And what would that look like for you? But also, like, how do you be a support and not a hindrance? Because I do think us all, overwhelming the system is not helpful. So those are the things we're thinking about right now. But honestly, like, it's changing every day, and we're trying to just stay really close with our partners, but also start to ask new partners, folks that we weren't funding in the community, what do they need? And I think things like what you guys are doing here are really important, because we need simple ways to get a lot of resources that are really responsive to systems to solve for some of these issues. And then I would also just say we need some knowledge capture and we got to share what we're learning in communities as this rolls through communities. And I don't see that happening quite yet. And it's difficult because everybody's just, responding to the fires. I hope that helps. And I'm so sorry, I have to jump off, but I'm going to be looking forward to the video from this and the notes, and we're here and want to support. So thank you,
Thanks,
Sarah.
you're a voice from the future for many of us. So we really appreciate it.
Thanks, you guys.
So I'm going to do a minute of a few seconds of wait time to see if there are others who want to jump in. We have many questions in the chat box, so I'm going to go to those in a minute, but I'll pause for a moment.
We were just surveying, by the way, we weren't intending to be rude, but we were surveying some of the questions that are coming in. There are a lot. So I don't know if you want to field those, Celine.
Well, so I'm going to just mostly go in order. So the first is a comment about resources. GFE can be helpful as an aggregator of resources. We're starting to do that. We encourage those of you on the phone to let us know what you have. We also have a resource in GFE Connects, which is an online platform that we can kind of start a conversation regarding these issues on. And so that might be a way of kind of having continual connection. But then the next question is about some of the foundations on the line are place-based. In working with the NEA, would it be possible to prioritize making sure that a funder's dollars go to the communities that they serve?
Yes, this is exactly what we're talking about now. And we, of course, would want to honor that to the extent that we can. We have considered thus far that these funds are coming into a pooled account, but of course, respectfully and responsibly, we would look to where they've come from in the distribution.
And I think I will just say on behalf of GFE, we are in contact with a lot of local partners, community foundations. We are, thinking about having the same type of call that, that looks into, that type of role. So I think there are many ways to get at these questions. And so the next one I think is related to early ed. So younger grades, K-2, special education. How are you thinking, or do you have any knowledge of how folks are thinking about that, especially as it relates to distance learning and care?
I do not at this time.
But I think that it's Kelly Doyle, I think, raises some really important issues around some of this is, how do we care for students at that age level? So that is one. Yeah, so parents have asked if daycare would be available for their families via nonprofits. What advice can you provide to potential liabilities of opening churches, other sites? Again, I think, Sarah, so some of these I think are more broadly entering a conversation for the first time with other funders about how do we provide support. So I'm not going to put this all on NEA and say, I appreciate that we're starting to surface these issues. And again, I encourage you to come to us. We can have smaller conversations, spark smaller conversations among folks who are working on specific issues like this.
Right. Our stronghold right now in being able to provide this response and turn around funds quickly. And I want to be very respectful and responsible in anything we might state. Our sweet spot for the moment is the K12 system. And so we are concerned and conscientious about the need in early childhood and higher ed. But right now, that's not what we are promising that we're able to do quickly.
And I think there was a mention of rural education, as I was thinking about enlisting the support of, yeah.
That's a special concern of ours. And there are associated entities, without going all into the NEA, that are particularly focused on the rural community, as well as the National Rural Education Association and others with whom we will be in contact to ensure that kind of that equity, frankly.
So I just shared the link in the chat. Do you want to just share the link in the chat with the page that NEA is amassing resources on? I can say it.
Well, you're already online.
No, but I'm muted.
Oh.
Hey, this is Meg. I just wanted to say, I just shared, sorry, we're getting a big echo. Can you, sorry. Technical difficulty, sorry about that. I just shared in the chat the link to the webpage that NEA is developing in response to coronavirus. It's still in development, but they're adding resources every hour to it. So that's in the chat, as well as a link to a CDC checklist if you haven't seen that for schools.
Super.
And this is great. We're seeing
So that's a lot of basic information, not specifically about the pooled fund, but just general information that folks may want to access relative to schools and educators' responses to these needs.
And everything that's showing up in the chat box in terms of resources, in terms of other congregations of funders that are happening, calls that are happening in the near-term future, we will be continuing to kind of pull that and post it on our site and get it out via social media as well.
And it very well may be, Celine, that we can, we'll think with you about means of in real time getting hard information up to folks. Again, I want to ask everyone's tolerance that setting up this system began yesterday. And again, it is also something that the NEA Foundation is accustomed to doing, and we are skilled at doing it. That we're not able to tell you immediately to whom the funds would be directed is, I hope, not a distraction. As we continue, and by the way, I do want to say we also welcome and invite others' ideas about how we can best serve and be responsible. I go back to what Zoe had raised, and we have seen this in other instances, and we'll do everything we can to ensure that the way we provide the funds is indeed supportive and not confusing and more chaos for folks at an already complicated time.
I think that's right. And I see a continuing dialogue in the chat box about worries about nonprofits. As a current nonprofit leader and longtime nonprofit leader, I think that is a very appropriate concern. And I think it's separate from getting basic needs to students. We're starting with the student question. I think that's a really important place to start. But I do think that I appreciate seeing that foundations really are worried about nonprofit partners and how this is going to impact them. So, so we will be taking that up for sure. Let's see. Okay. So I guess a direct question for you, Sarah, is the fund that the NEA is proposing for any K-12 schools across the nation or for specific locals?
Oh, no, any at this time. Yes. I think that's critical. Mm-hmm. It would very much stymie this process, I think, to try to have pre-identified categories and places and such. Really, we had no idea, first of all, that so many funders would be interested, and it's very encouraging. But all the funds would be pooled, and yet place-based investments would be honored to the extent possible.
I think we also, even in this call, even in the chat box, you can see the possibilities for inequity arising. So there are some places that have really strong local community foundations. When Zoe talked about Seattle having already raised 10 million in their local community foundation, we know there are areas of the country that are going to be equally hard hit, who don't have a strong local community foundation, who might be rural areas. And so, you know, part of my intent in starting with AFT and NEA foundations was to say, you know, you have touch points in so many of those communities that are already under-resourced, that don't have connections to philanthropy, but also you have ways to get dollars to some of the places where our funders are making place-based donations and need to focus on those place-based donations. So,
the community foundations, I came most recently from a community foundations, really excel in looking out for the nonprofits. And there are uneven capabilities across the foundations with respect to their relations with schools, school districts, school leaders, and such. And so I do think it's really important that the opportunity that the NEA and AFT are putting forth to get resources to schools, students, school districts is really distinct, but we would rely on our community foundation partners for the broader nonprofit sector's needs and interests. And I think they are the go-to. They know best what's happening on the ground at this time.
I think, so there's a caution in the chat box, which I think is absolutely fair. We have many educators who do not live in the communities that are most in need. We recognize that. I think that's a perfectly appropriate caution in this case. And, you know,
and it's one of the reasons why, you know, we have no idea whether or not a distribution system through the grocers is going to work. I think it's one of the reasons why we have to look at that we have no idea how long these shutdowns are going to go on. What personnel will be available through schools to support the distribution. And this is why we are, quite frankly, looking at some unusual and new partners to explore all of the options.
Other questions, other ideas, any thoughts on how to operationalize this well?
What are some other questions that have come in?
I have another question about how are you communicating to your members? Like, how are teachers being, you know, advised in terms of just, I mean, I'm thinking that the little kids probably are not as affected health-wise, but then you have older teachers, high school students, curious about what communications teachers are receiving just as people who are out there literally and figuratively.
The NEA has really robust systems that have been in place, you know, long before this crisis emerged, for getting word out quickly, at least to the 3 million members and their affiliated entities and associations. So between the NEA and the AFT, I know that our immediate and direct reach to educators is very, very significant. It's one of, you know, I have to say that, you know, we sit at this incredible nexus of being an independent entity, But through this partnership with the NEA, it's encouraging at a time like this that we do have immediate, real-time, real substantive access and opportunity to reach folks.
Sarah, I think related to the last note in the chat box about partnerships with
I'm sorry, but
community, with superintendents, it's probably worth folks trying to, for you to describe a little bit about how NEA Foundation and then relatedly NEA builds partnerships in community. That for many of us on the line, we're not deeply familiar with how the unions operate, how they operate in communities, and how that could address some of the concerns about dollars not going around superintendents or really meeting community needs.
Right, and I don't want to speak for the NEA entirely. I don't know that that's altogether appropriate for me to do so, because heaven forbid I would want to leave out some critical aspect that it would want communicated. As pertains to the NEA Foundation, we receive appeals continually from school district educators for identifying their needs, and we form partnerships accordingly. We have done this for many, many years. We have various types of partnerships supporting educators' work. I don't know how much more specific you want me to be. It's a normative practice for us. It's the way that we do all that we do. We don't sit in our offices and determine what we think educators need, but the starting point for every investment is a conversation and dialogue with educators about how we can support their efforts to advance equity and opportunity.
And I'll put on my my professor hat for a moment. I teach a class on unions and teacher leadership at Harvard, and one of the things we talk about is how frequently the unions really work in deep partnership with community organizations, in deep partnership with superintendents. And so, again, one of the reasons why we wanted to kind of foreground this conversation, because we know that in many communities that are going to be affected, you all already have those existing relationships to be good partners, or at least NEA does.
It's very important for the foundation too. It's a critical ethic for us. We believe very much in family, school, and community partnership, and everything that we do is executed accordingly. So for instance, I share with you that right now we're involved in helping some areas of the South to develop community schools. And in each of those instances, the districts and district leadership are integral to that effort, as are other educational leaders within the system, supported by nonprofits, educational organizations, advocacy organizations, and organizers. As you would find in any community school endeavor, there's a robust partnership that's it's growing in some of these communities, especially the rural communities. But the intent is always that it is broadly inclusive. We think it is critical. By the way, I neglected to mention, and my colleague sitting to my left here, Meg, reminded me that to let you know that one of the vehicles for easy access to educators and sharing information and planning through the NEA system is their state affiliates. And so each state has an affiliate office, and there are local affiliate offices, and that's the system through which information, communication, plans flow.
I think that's helpful.
That's like a very high level explanation of what can actually, as you might imagine, sometimes get rather complicated. But I really appreciate the question, because it goes to that ethic of partnership in creating solutions, which is critical for the NEA Foundation, and something that we ensure in all that we do is honored, and that we're faithful to it.
Well, and I think you mentioned, it does get into the weeds a little bit, but the fact that you have thousands of affiliates that exist and function all around the country is that infrastructure that's needed to figure out where the need is, where the partnerships are strong with the district and community. So all of that, I think, is super important as we think about deploying resources.
So in this instance, we will not prescribe and determine or direct where these resources go of our own accord. That would be the height of audacity and bad philanthropy. You know, we are very much relying on NEA and our own surveying and to get what people are saying they recognize is needed on the ground and how it can actually work versus how we might idealize it should work when in fact it won't. So yes, it's very much a mutual process of planning that we always rely upon and obviously will in this instance.
That's great. So we have a few more minutes. I want to do one last call for questions. I also want to do one last call for other comments and ideas. Oh, okay, so we've got one more question.
Actually, I have a question.
Yeah.
Will there be a blog or means of ongoing dialogue with folks that have questions about this? Because again, as so much is evolving in real time, I want to make certain that anything that we were not able to be as clear and definitive about on this call, that folks will need to have confidence and comfort in what, you know, in making a move to contribute to a pooled fund like this so that we have a means of responding.
Yes, exactly. So I will propose some next steps in a moment and get people's feedback on next steps in a moment. But yes, we have the ability to kind of work through that. We got a question about what measures, levers of accountability you might use in this process.
Yeah. Again, this is not a normative grant-making situation and never is in a crisis like this. And so in crises like this, we do have to rely very much on the vetting and the due diligence that we can do with those who put forth ideas reasonably and responsibly. We will not be putting forth measures of success for this investment other than what, with all due respect to all, is obviously reasonable. And at the same time, we have to respect that folks on the ground are having a hard time right now figuring out these distribution systems themselves. So I would be overpromising to you right now to tell you what kinds of checks and balances in each investment will make sense. What I can assure you of is the NEA Foundation's exemplary record in quality grants management. We have, over the past 10 years, received the Charity Navigator's highest rating. Again, this is a normal practice for us. So the lack of specificity with respect to all of the protocols is only because we are working this out as we speak.
Okay, great. So let's move in the last few minutes to a conversation about next steps. What I do want to point us to is, number one, we will download everything that's in the chat and make sure NEA Foundation is able to answer any questions that didn't get fully answered. Number two, we do have a mechanism through GFE Connects to foster an ongoing conversation. We could also do that with a small group over email, obviously. And so what we'll do now, so it looks like over the course of the call, we've had people come on and off. The highest number I saw in terms of participants at one point was 95, which means we probably have had over 100 people participate during this hour. What we're gonna do is reach out to all of you and ask about your willingness to engage in a deeper conversation, thinking about starting a pooled fund and moving this as quickly as we can with the levers of quality that we can have in place. So if that makes sense to all of you, that's the way we'll proceed, and we'll do that this afternoon. And just ask for your kind of ongoing participation. We can set up, you know, kind of additional calls, emails, that type of thing from here. Any other thoughts on appropriate next steps? Any other thoughts and contributions that folks have to make at this point?
I just wanted you to know we were, again, not intending to be rude. We're dialoguing among ourselves how to be most supportive to everyone. And we do think, I didn't hear what you just said, Celine, but we could publish the directions with respect to how to make the contributions. But I think that as GFE has so graciously served as the portal to help put this together, it might be best that everything is in one place versus 15 different places. So we will publish that on through you if that's acceptable to you, Celine.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, and you know there'll be a point to spin it all to you, but yeah, we can make sure that you know we take the names of people who participated today, reach out to them with you copied to just say what's your appetite for going forward with this, and you know, and we'll try to get a group together.
Super.
I want to encourage others who have other ideas for how we can be a connector and information source. Let us know. We are trying to work with all of our members to make sure that, you know, all of these various issues from student needs to nonprofit needs are addressed during this time, and that we are able to connect funders to one another. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, NEA Foundation colleagues. I encourage everyone to join us back in 6 minutes or so, where we'll have additional information, where we will have additional conversation and be thinking through this. I know our colleagues from the NEA Foundation, some of them are going to be able to join us in that next hour as well, but we're going to turn it over mostly to the AFT Foundation. So thank you all again. This is such important work, and I really, really am heartened by the level of participation today. Have a great day. Goodbye, or see you in 5 minutes.